Hi, I'm Edward Cohen. Welcome to Tangent, conversations with real estate and tech innovators. Commercial real estate is a data-rich industry that mostly doesn't act like one. Leases, work orders, tenant communications, maintenance logs, vendor contracts, and financial statements. The data exists, but most of it sits in PDFs, spreadsheets, and email threads, disconnected, unstructured, and hard to act on. And now AI is everywhere. Every conference, every pitch deck, every vendor conversation starts with it or at the very least ends with it. But the gap between talking about AI and actually deploying it across a real portfolio with real tenants, real vendors, and real P&Ls is significant. So how do you build the data foundation first? How do you decide what to automate and what not to? And what happens to your team on the other side of that? I'm excited to say that we have the perfect guest to talk about this. Justin Siegel. Justin runs Boxer Property, a commercial real estate company managing over 15 million square feet nationally. Justin, where does this podcast find you?
I'm in Houston at the moment at our corporate headquarters.
Great to have you here. Before I ask you every question, when software you needed didn't exist, you co-founded it. You started Brava Systems that is now powering Boxer Property's own AI deployment is now used across the industry. You also co-founded Stemmons Enterprise, an operations platform used across multiple industries, and Relay Human Cloud, a global staffing and team augmentation company. The first question is, how do you have time for all of this?
Well, I'll tell you, and thank you for having me. The time that you reclaim from having things under control is incredible, right? And so you have this chicken and egg thing where everybody is running around saying they're so busy, but the things that they're busy doing would be much easier if they had better data and better systems. So if you can find a way to start the process of improving and then reclaim time and resources and the ability to focus and start using those to improve the process more, then it's a virtuous cycle and it can happen very quickly. The challenge that companies have sometimes is just to break out of the state that they're in and get started on that transformation process.
Couldn't agree more. And you also seem to have a bias for action. The first time we spoke a few months ago and I invited you to be on the podcast, you immediately had a bias towards action and let's make this an email, let's make this tangible. You weren't beating around the bush, and that bias towards action, I think it also keeps things moving. But let's talk about the data foundation when it comes to AI. So Boxer, you manage over 50 million square feet across office, retail, and hotels. So before you implement AI, what has to be true about your data?
Well, you can implement AI in a lot of different ways, and some of them are quite easy and superficial. But if we're really going to implement AI in a way that is important for the organization, we have to have a data foundation. And it used to be that data foundation was very difficult to build and very expensive and very time consuming. And this was a time of data normalization and writing integrations and having joins between SQL tables. And it was very painstaking and not particularly fun. It's a lot easier today. And I wish that we didn't start 15 years ago. I'm glad that we did, but if we had started today, the things that would have taken us a year now take a month. And the things that used to take a month now take a week, and so on. So the tools are a lot better, but I would say at a very minimum, we used to say you need an enterprise taxonomy. Now we say you need a minimally functional ontology. And that minimally functional ontology is going to start with just your basic data elements. So if we're talking about in the context of real estate, we need a list of properties, tenants, vendors, units, employees, and a few other things on that list. Those things need to be able to be harmonized with each other. They don't have to be directly connected, but there's a layer of kind of semantic harmonization that has to happen. And if we just have those basic things, it's like going into the workforce and, you need a blue suit, you need a black suit, you need a blazer, you need some khaki pants, you need a belt, and brown shoes and black shoes and some white shirts. And now you can kind of go into any setting. And so for a real estate company, wanting to build a foundation, you could have a very complex wardrobe with lots of specialty gear. But if you have the basics in place, then there's a tremendous amount that you can do just on the basis of that.
Operators today, I mean, they have a ton more data than they realize. But what are some of those data sets, or what categories of data do they have more than what they realize? And what areas are they missing data?
There's plenty of data out there. And truly the issue is not how much data, but it's more about how to connect it and have it work in harmony. But there's a few important data sets. The accounting system or your ERP is always the gold standard, right? Because you get in trouble if that data is not correct. And there's all kinds of historical reasons going back to the Egyptians inventing double entry bookkeeping. So that's a great source of data. After that, you have your HR system, because you have to keep track of all your people and you have to collect payroll, taxes, and all of that. Then typically companies have some kind of CRM. And after that comes everything else. If we just look in the beginning at those three data sets, which is accounting, people, and CRM, we usually find 90% of what we need there, to be honest.
We're hearing a lot of clean your data first, which, to many, especially if you're a mid to enterprise company, sounds like a long-term IT project. So is it really a long-term IT project, or is there like a smaller starting point?
It's definitely smaller. There are some minimal things that you need, as I said. You need your basic data elements to be discoverable and connected to each other in a way that makes sense for your organization. But I think about this a little bit like having somebody come over to your home. If you're anything like me, if you walk into my house on a random day, there might be some dishes in the sink. Maybe I didn't make my bed in the morning. Maybe I left some clothes on the floor. But this idea that we have to make our homes pristine before somebody else comes in, that we have to pretend that we're not a person, that we're living in a model showroom, and then we can have company over, is not really realistic. You do it every once in a while if you're having a party, or if there's some event at your home or whatever. But generally speaking, we understand that companies have some opportunities to get things a little better organized, and they may want to improve things or go through a few processes to clean things up. But we can understand that companies are like people. It's not going to be perfect, but if we can just jump in and get started, or the people in the organization can, and say, we don't have to go through this ridiculous process of trying to make everything pristine. We just need the basics in place. And there's a lot of tolerance for the fact that everything isn't neat and tidy all the time. Then we can really start making progress. So I'm very much a fan of getting started. Now, you can't stop after step one. We have to continue the march of improving data, but we can do that while we're making progress in other places. And if you expect an organization to invest a lot in data without seeing any benefits from it, without being able to leverage that data in a way that makes a difference, then they wander away and stop being interested after a while. We have to use the output of the data work that we do as quickly as possible, and then not stop there with the data.
I can totally see how a real estate company that's been run by multiple generations of a family, or that's been around for a number of years, they will be sitting on a ton of data, and a lot of it might not even be digitized. However, it can quickly become overwhelming when you now rightfully said that it really is one step at a time. It can be overwhelming to think about at an org level, but when you think about, at a role level, or even at a single task level, a task that you need to do every day or every week, that's a good place to start, I would say. Now, in terms of where most commercial real estate companies are, where are they when it comes to data readiness?
The challenge that they have good data. They often don't have a way of leveraging that outside of a given application or a given department. Mm-hmm. The issue is not that they don't have data, it's that they don't have a method for organizing and connecting it. Typically, there's no one in the organization that's really able to do that. There's no one with a data mandate. There's nobody with a skill set that can be leveraged across departments. It tends to be either IT or departmentally focused. And what we're looking for is a layer of expertise and a layer of desire for the organization to connect on an enterprise level. And very often companies, they either don't have the person or the talent to do that, or they don't have the capacity. They don't have the money. We have solved both of those things typically through our global talent platform, which has allowed us to access skills and to free up capacity in the organization to invest in data. But if you don't have a data analyst or two, if you don't have someone with an understanding of data architecture, it's not that they don't have the data. The issue is they don't have the capacity or the talent or the mandate to bring those things together, even in a basic way.
The mandate framing is interesting because in recent time, a lot of the large REITs or publicly traded companies have hired people with the titles of Chief Innovation Officer, which different companies meant different things. Some of them were like their internal VC arm. Other were like the ones pushing for new tech tools for different departments. At the end of the day, though, it seemed like it didn't move the needle a lot in terms of adopting technologies. And I'm not saying that was wrong. It's possible that a lot of the solutions didn't meet or they didn't have enough backing internally for other teams to take them seriously, quote unquote. But do you think every company, especially of certain size, should hire a dedicated data person or AI person to drive the adoption or to drive incremental efficiencies?
I think that the whole chief innovation officer thing really was a mixed bag and has been a mixed bag. And as you said, there's some organizations where it's like performative. They need somebody to get up on stage at the conferences to talk about things so that the company appears to be cutting edge. There are other ones where the company got very focused on something that is performative, that is siloed, like, hey, we did this one thing that is really cool, but they didn't change the whole organization. The ones that have been, I think, the most effective are the ones that are really taking an enterprise approach and saying, we're going to have a plan, we're going to have a process, we're going to have a roadmap, and that roadmap builds to a larger reality of like the company's going to operate differently, and also includes ascertainable steps with obvious outcomes along the way to keep people engaged and happy. Today, if the organization doesn't have anybody who focuses on data, it would be like going back to the 1990s and saying, who's your networking person? And in the mid to late 90s, companies were getting these teams together of like IT people. Now you've got a network manager and a help desk person and a cybersecurity officer and someone who does cloud infrastructure and someone who does desktop and someone who runs applications. Like, that ecosystem has become quite well developed in an organization. When you think about data and AI and this new kind of set of opportunities in front of us, companies will have teams of people in specialized roles. If today you don't have a data team or an AI solution architect or somebody who is thinking about those disciplines and being able to make things happen, then it's time to get on board. And the only thing that I think is worse than seeing a company have nothing is seeing a company have some of those people with no actual plan. What we're really looking for to see companies do well is this combination of four things. You need some core data, which we've talked about. It's not that hard. You need some good people. Then you need systems. You need these solutions, whether it's an AI solution or an operations platform. And then finally, you need strategy. And with those four things, data, people, systems, and strategy, we can really make something incredible out of almost any company.
So let's talk about the implementation part, what's working and what's not. But let's assume a real estate owner operator comes to you and says they want to start using AI. What's the first question you ask them, or what should they be asking themselves?
There's some very important perils, like things that people are doing that we want to be careful of. One, and I'm going to start by saying what we think should be avoided. On one hand, you have this citizen coding, agent sprawl. Everybody is building things. People are very taken at the moment with Anthropic and Claude Code, and individual people who were previously doing a particular job now being a coder or developing agents. And that is a recipe for just entrenching ways of doing things that are a little bit faster, but also having a massive sprawl of unconnected agents that don't talk to each other, and they're very fragile, and they're hard to keep track of, and they can do dangerous things. And even at best, it's like having a faster bucket brigade instead of pumping water through a pipe. So that's one side, is the citizen coding and agent sprawl. On the other side, you have this vendor-driven AI stuff where you're not doing anything in your company, you're just buying products. And there's one version where you just buy a bunch of products that are like, you walk around the trade show and go to each booth. There's an AI for this and an AI solution for that. And they end up just being disconnected. And the vendors are often just having some prompts and upcharging you for tokens. Or you can go to a platform-driven solution where the vendor is controlling it and they have all kinds of features, but now you're stuck in that platform. And I don't want to be stuck in a platform, because I would still be trying to do my searches on Lycos or Excite or Alta Vista or whatever. We recognize that the market is changing. So when we talk to a company, or when I talk to someone, what I'm often looking for is, do they have an understanding of how dangerous it is to let everybody build everything? It'll be like SharePoint again, or of not developing any internal capabilities. And instead, what we're looking for is a platform agnostic, supported, orchestrated way of deploying AI, so that we have governance, so that we can see what's happening, so that we can control our spend. Controlling the spend is one of the biggest things that people are now realizing. What I think people should be looking for is a holistic approach that is platform agnostic, that can bring in tools and solutions that can enable the organization to build and deploy things on top of stable infrastructure. And I would think about this generally as an infrastructure and architecture first approach, as opposed to a use case and feature approach. Infrastructure and architecture comes first, features and use cases come second. If a company starts talking about their use cases or the features they need, we know that the architecture and infrastructure is going to be lacking.
And I think you touched on two crucial points without actually naming them. The first one being vibe coding, and the second being the conversation between, should I buy this or should I build this? And it's something that I would say every commercial real estate company right now is pondering. Everyone has a tinker in their company, right? That is an early adopter or likes to tinker or takes the lead on learning something to solve a problem. And the cost of LLMs making intelligence, commodity, leveling the playing field, everyone having access to the same affordable technology, is making people believe that you can just vibe code a solution that will scale and work for your enterprise.
Vibe coding is the most wonderful and the most dangerous thing that's come along in a while. And by the way, we love it. I mean, we use it a lot, but we use it in a very strategic way for certain things. Vibe coding is great for interface. It's great for connectors. But what vibe coding is terrible for, in my opinion, is logic and security and tracking. If you're developing something and you're building a front end and you're vibe coding, and I'm like, awesome, great. But if you're using that to manage like the movement of important information in a way that is tracked and secure, and companies are going to have all kinds of random stuff. It's like having a bunch of interns come to your company, but they can get into your bank accounts and they can open any door and they can move money and they can create invoices and they can talk to customers and change lease terms. That, like, you would never give someone that kind of access and control, but you let someone vibe code something in the wrong area, it's going to be very difficult to unmix the Play-Doh. You also raised this issue of like, okay, there's always someone who's tinkering, and we love that. I mean, we celebrate those people, but very often what they're doing is showing the world of possible and showing ways in which the company can change. But almost by definition, they're not experienced in this space, but suddenly you're doing things that can be very impactful on the company. And I always feel like it's important to bring in someone who has a feeling of enterprise architecture and roadmap and what the approach is going to be. And the tools are changing so quickly out there that someone who's a hobbyist or a tinkerer who has a regular job and now suddenly is trying to keep up with this, it's like a very difficult to actually execute. So I think a serious company that wants to move beyond playing around and beyond doing things that are either surface level or dangerous needs to have a real plan with real qualified people who understand not only where the market is today, but where it's going in the future.
ROI, the favorite and least favorite word for technologists, and it's the top of mind question when operators are considering adopting a technology, and especially something as potentially transformative as AI. So how do you think about ROI with AI adoption? Is it measurable early, or does it take time to show up, or are we asking a fundamentally wrong question in how we think about it?
It's a very important question, but it's often misused and misunderstood in very important ways. Clearly, we don't want to run off in the direction of just doing whatever the fad says and not think about the bigger picture or not think about the return. These are real investments. And, having no sense of that isn't a great idea. On the other hand, it's very often a question that somebody asks that is a distraction because it's very hard to quantify ROI on some of these things. So if I asked, what is the ROI on video conferencing? Or what is the ROI on your cell phone, right? How do you answer that? If we talk about the ROI on your cell phone, it's like almost, we couldn't live without them. But how do you quantify that? So if you're talking to a real estate person, it's like, what's the ROI on resurfacing the parking lot? Can you quantify that? And a lot of times what happens is people ask that question because they want to delay, or they want to say no, or they don't have a budget at all, or they don't have the institutional capital or the personal fortitude to make a decision and move forward. So they give you an impossible task, and you have to run off and try and justify something, justify not doing something, justify not having control of your data as your employees start to wander away because you're asking them to do things in an old-fashioned way. How do you allow yourself to only have the employees who are comfortable using old-fashioned technology? But at the same time, there are clear costs, and we see people making horrible decisions about architecture that lead to very expensive AI bills. And for us at Boxer using Brava, we've really been able to control our AI spend in a very meaningful way. We see other companies running up huge bills and having to turn things off. And so one part of it is to say, look, what is your spend on tokens and compute? How are you optimizing that? Can you really track it? And currently, as we record this today, we're spending about $2,000 a month on tokens and compute at Boxer for 1,000 people. And so it's $2 a month. It's like less than the coffee bill. It's less than the coffee for one day for most people. On the other hand, if you don't have good architecture, it's like ordering everything from DoorDash, and not just every meal, but every individual person ordering every different dish separately and having a DoorDash deliverer bring your appetizer, your entree, your drink, multiplied by all the people, and the costs go up like crazy. So we do need to be able to say, what is the cost of this, and how can we track that, and how can we optimize by using the right architecture and the best models and platforms? And then the truth is there is a lot of quantifiable benefit out of using AI. Sometimes it's hard to put a finger on, but like we look at the AI activations that we have, these is like 100,000 a month, basically. And if we say, look, that saves about 2 minutes on average per activation, that's a team of 19 or 20 people in terms of time savings alone. I could look at our acquisitions process and say, we saved this much time. But really what I want to say is, how many more deals were we able to see? How did we know where to focus our lens? How did we underwrite these and make better decisions using AI? And those better decisions far outpace the value of save time.
Let's talk about that example and zoom in. You mentioned how, Boxer running due diligence. Now you can go over 100 deals at once versus 10 simultaneously before. So how do you even begin to put a number on what that is worth? And how do you make sure that it doesn't get noisy?
putting a value on how much it's worth is difficult. If I told you that you were only going to look at one deal a month, you would say, no way, right? We're never going to do a deal. If I told you that you could look at 5,000 deals a month and that it was going to be a good sorting process, and not that it's going to underwrite everything for you, but that we have a series of steps that these go through that allow us to look at 5,000. And at the end, maybe we're only underwriting 10, but a lot of those we wouldn't have found otherwise. We wouldn't have time. We would have been spending our resources underwriting a bunch of things that weren't going to match our criteria. And so if you do one deal that is marginally better, or one additional deal, it far exceeds the cost of the AI implementation. You have to tell me how much a good deal is worth, and then I can tell you, how much this process is worth. But I can't imagine, after we invented elevators, we were able to build buildings much taller, and you only take the stairs in an emergency, or if you want some exercise maybe. And if you have a company that's on the 30th floor somewhere and they suddenly told everybody to take the stairs, you'd be like, what are you talking about? How could I go back to, why would I do that? Why do we have a 30-story building anyway if I have to use the stairs? And I think very soon we're going to be at a place where if you tell employees they can't use AI for something, they're going to go, why not? You expect me to look at every deal that comes in? Do I have to read every single email? Should I write with a quill? People that wait too long and are hung up on ROI stuff or don't have the right people, they're just going to miss their opportunities, and people will wander away to other companies that are better equipped. Employee satisfaction and productivity is important, not just to the company, but to the people. And now companies are in a place where they have to move faster to adapt, because the individuals are experiencing these tools in their personal and consumer lives. And they're coming back to the company and saying, why would you make me do it in a way that doesn't make sense? It's like a waste of my time.
Yep. I'm still surprised at how many employees at some of the largest real estate companies out there are waiting months even to just have access to Claude or ChatGPT. And we're not talking about, any MCP connection or anything. We're talking about basic, just chatbot stuff. And I think those that are innovative, that are competitive, they'll be searching smaller shops or even opening their own shops because they will be frustrated.
I also am sympathetic to the employers in that, because if you just give everybody, go set up an Anthropic enterprise license and give everybody, that's also wandering off a responsible path. So companies today, I think of it like, you remember from the Odyssey, it was like there was Scylla and Charybdis, the monster and the whirlpool, and you have to navigate between these things. You can't stay where you are. You can't do nothing. If you give everybody a bunch of powerful tools and tell them to build whatever they want, that's not a good outcome. If you give them a bunch of tools that are superficial and don't really do very much, you're not going to get there. What I think companies need is a solid infrastructure with reusable data, with reusable core tools that can be modified by department or by solution, but controlled and governed and tracked and optimized in a centralized way, which is what we do with Brava, but it's also how our company is able to function. And we're using AI in every single department. A huge amount of it is not by a person deciding to use it. It's by automation. If you're a deals analyst, you come in and someone has sent us a deal, it's already been pre-analyzed by AI. So by the time you even see it, it's there. You could ignore that if you want, or maybe a document comes in, the document will be profiled and extracted. And now there's an embedding of that document that is available for AI tools, but also you don't have to open every document. Having those things set up in a way that is automated is very different than having everybody manually do it.
To your earlier point about token usage, and for those who aren't familiar out there, tokens are essentially how much it costs to use AI. And so far, we've been spoiled with the VC subsidized monthly subscription costs versus token-based cost. I know there was this AI consultant that was rumored to be Amazon, unconfirmed, that spent, I think it was $500 million in 1 month in tokens, or Uber going through their annual token allocation in the first quarter of the year. Certainly something that should not be especially giving access to an entire team, an entire organization. Definitely something that should be top of mind.
Tokens are one measure of how we have to pay for the AI that we're using. And it's not a single thing that allows you to do more by spending less. But first of all, I would say companies don't have a way of tracking the costs of these things. So really, it's typically tokens and compute is the spend, the variable cost drivers. If you're in a real estate company, just ask your CFO, like, what's the GL code for tokens and compute? I know how much we spend on travel. I know how much we spend on electricity. I know how much we spend on salaries or insurance. What's the GL code, the general ledger code for that stuff? And if the answer is we don't have one, then it's like we don't have a way of allocating these costs to different departments, to different people, to different projects or properties. And then you say, okay, how are we selecting the model or the platform to use? Because tokens cost different amounts in different models and in different types of solutions. And you can have a token that costs 1 unit, and the same thing in a different model is going to cost 100 units. And so, we need the right tool for the job. And a lot of times, if you just give people access to big, fat, fancy models, they're going to use it for everything. And so companies need to learn how to select the right models, the right solutions, and match them to different parts of a workflow. Increasingly, companies who have a capacity to do that will be getting the same outputs for a lot less. If you don't have an ability to control and track your costs and use model selectors and custom models and different platforms for different parts of a process, then you're going to be spending way too much and not being able to control it. We better start thinking about that stuff now, I think.
Let's talk about the workforce, the humans, and usually the framing around the conversation with humans and AI is who gets automated out of their job first. But I want to flip the script here is what parts of your business are you seeing that you need more humans as you deploy more AI, or where do you foresee what departments of your business, what types of businesses do you see needing more humans as AI adoption grows?
Well, okay, so certainly before there was machinery, everybody was carrying a shovel. And then you have machinery, and now you need mechanics and people to maintain the machinery and to build it and so forth. So of course we need AI solution architects, we need data people, we need people who are handling transformation and change in a company, and those groups are growing. When we think about what people are doing, that's also kind of changing in a very positive way. We used to be hiring people largely for their ability to know and remember things and their ability to spot patterns, and sometimes for their ability to do things in a repetitive way. So it was an experience-based paradigm, and we would hire people and look at their resumes to see how much experience they had. And then if we liked that, we would then talk to them in an interview and figure out what kind of person they are, right? So in that older paradigm, it was experience first, aptitude and personality second. And I think in many, many, many places now, we can locate some of that experience, the knowledge, the recall, the pattern recognition in the AI solutions. And what that does is it frees up the capacity of the person to use their aptitude and use their personality. For years, people would complain that, it's like a catch-22. You need experience to get into this job, but nobody will give you the experience. We can say goodbye to that in many cases now, not entirely, of course. But now it's like, look, you want to be a property manager? Great. You can come be a property manager at our company. What I want to understand first is what kind of person are you? What is your cognitive aptitude? What are your personality traits? What motivates you? How do you interact with people? And a lot of the memorization that went into being an effective property manager is now handled by systems. So the system may be looking at the pattern of what's going on and raising some flags or remembering it's time to do this, or calling your attention to something, or answering a question for you about how something works. And we're able to deploy agents that use a lot of industry knowledge, but also historical knowledge to bring that experience into the person, who then doesn't have to be stuck in this experience loop. They can be expressing themselves as an individual. They can be solving problems, talking to people, and not being a filing cabinet of remembering how things were done in the past.
You may have just convinced me or made me realize that this is a hope, but also a belief now that AI is going to help humans become humans again, or do what humans are good at, doing repetitive things, doing mechanical without applying, like you said, our personality, our judgment, our intuition. That's what makes us human.
If you ask somebody to do that again and again and again and again, if it doesn't lead to personal fulfillment, to be a beast of burden or to be a robot or to be a professional rememberer or a professional reminder. What happens is people have, in that older paradigm, you get good at doing something. In the beginning, you're excited about getting good at it. After a while, you're more valuable to the company, so they pay you more, and the lifestyle expands, and you get used to trips and how many square feet you live in and all that. But your interest goes down, and people end up feeling stuck, right? They become disconnected from their work. They don't create value or feel fulfilled in the workplace because they're being used as a machine. And I believe, and I have been seeing this in my own experience, is that we can free people up from those things. If we can free people up to express themselves as people in the workplace to create value, then we're going to have the kind of company that people want to be in. And the AI becomes an enabler, not a new master or a disabler.
Last but not least, collaboration superpower. If you could partner with one person, historic or living, real or fictional, for your companies, who would it be?
I mean, listen, there's so many ways to answer this, but I want to honor the question with picking one person. And I'll say Tom Davenport, who is an author and a professor. And I read one of his books years ago, and it was really transformational for me. And it was called Analytics at Work. I mean, this was a long time ago, but he's written a lot more since then, and is really someone whose thought process and brain power has been really influential on me. And so that would be my pick.
Thomas Davenport, American academic and author specializing in business analytics, business process innovation, knowledge management, and AI. That's a great pick.
That's him.
I'll look into it. Justin, where can Tangent listeners and commercial real estate owners, operators, brokers, lenders, and everyone in between learn more about Boxer Property and Brava and Relay Human Cloud and connect with you?
I'll tell you, I'm easy to find. Brava Systems is the AI delivery orchestration software platform. Relay Human Cloud is our solution that provides dedicated offshore staff to US-based companies, predominantly real estate companies, many of which you would know. Boxer Property is our real estate firm. I'm very findable on LinkedIn, and I love talking about these things. So thank you for giving me the opportunity and the platform to do it. And I really appreciate what you're doing with Tangent.
Justin, thank you so much for coming to Tangent today and sharing your wisdom, your exciting companies, and your vision with us. Muchas gracias. If you learned something new or enjoyed the conversation, text a friend the link to this episode right now. You can find links, resources, and ways to connect with us in the show notes.